we have created a serious problem by doing two things at the same time. There are two signs up at our southern border. Two signs. They're very clear to anybody who wants to be there. Neither are posted, but they're there. The signs are no trespassing. Other sign is help wanted. No trespassing and help wanted. So those two signs have placed 12 million people in a very precarious situation, which Sam talked about last week. And I wanted to just share a little bit about Arizona, which has become a case study of how this has gone wrong. Arizona and the new law there has been called the harshest enforcement bill in the country so far against undocumented immigrants. But some see it as really a cry for help on the part of a state where there was no federal help being offered. The system had broken down, people had to be left to their own devices, and they came up with this law. Cry for help. Other side sees it as an indication of the wrong way to go to solve the problem. I think it's both. It's a cry for help, and I also think it's the wrong way to go. But it can help us to see what a better way might in fact be. So, the law, as you know, makes it illegal to have contact with those who are undocumented, and those where there is lawful contact with law enforcement, if there is a reasonable suspicion, it's a lovely term, a reasonable suspicion that they might be undocumented, they can be detained until their status is determined. One must carry papers, even if they are U.S. citizens or green card holders. They are subject to arrest if they don't carry papers. Now, of course, obviously, people who look like me are not being picked up, and the law enforcement officials would agree with that. So, in the piece I had you read from our blog, this law could be called another example of racial profiling or a racial social sin, because it can't be applied, it won't be applied in an egalitarian way, but it will be applied to people who have brown skin. Those who look like they might be illegal. And if you listen to the conversation, it's often, it's not brown skin, it's about people kind of look like they're illegal. So it could be how they're dressed, how they act, if they act fearful or skittish or shy. All these things indicate that they might be reasonably suspicious. But of course, it really does only apply to one demographic in Arizona. And so, as the law came out, I was asked to go out and speak to the law on the state capitol grounds one morning very early, and the governor was about to sign it. So there was a rally and a press conference call for faith leaders and undocumented people and so on. So I went out there and I learned about the law before going, and even more after I was out there. And many families in Arizona are, like everywhere, mixed status, meaning some members of the family are documented, legal, and some are not. And so you can have parents being undocumented and kids being legal, or the other way around. And so part of the law says that you can't be with people who are undocumented. You can't be found with them. And this could mean being found with your own members of your family. Another part of the law says you can't harbor or transport undocumented people. Now, I was out there with a lot of faith-based church Christian ministries that are doing things like running clinics, health clinics. I was with a nurse practitioner. She's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, evangelical Christian, but she's running this clinic for people who don't have health insurance. Now, likely as not, many of them will also not be documented, of course. So is she harboring them? Can what she's doing be thought to be illegal? A lot of folks are taking people to jobs or taking them to church on Sunday morning. Is that transporting undocumented people? Well, it clearly is. So will there be arrests for harboring or transporting undocumented people? There are a number of church leaders, including bishops, who said that this law literally makes Christian ministry illegal in Arizona. And you think about it, a lot of what we call Christian ministry could come under the violations of harboring and transporting people. The law clearly is dividing the community out there. It's making people very fearful, making them all feel less safe. I was in the early morning before I testified and spoke at the press conference, I was with a number of undocumented people who work at various Christian ministries around Phoenix. And sure enough, I met a woman who had come illegally. She had come illegally as an infant on the back of her farm worker father 47 years ago. She's never been back to Mexico. This is her home, and she was there. She's on the staff of this organization taking care of other undocumented people. But this is her home, her life, and she was living in fear because there had already been armed men and helicopters and raids into these neighborhoods where the folks live. And on the days of raids, they're afraid to go to work. They're afraid to go home, just to stay at home. And where they end up going is the church. It's a long history in the churches of being sanctuary, safe sanctuary, and that's where they were going. And so it raises the question, what if the armed men or helicopters decided to track down these undocumented people in their churches? Would there be confrontations between law enforcement and churches if churches are harboring undocumented people? Now, I don't think that's happened yet, but it could happen. So on that day, you had pastors and priests and others saying, and the governor was apparently up in the bell tower there. It was a very dramatic scene. It was the State House and lots of people and cameras, and the governor was allegedly up in the bell tower deciding whether to sign the bill, which she finally did sign. But you had priests and pastors turning their eyes to the bell tower and saying, Governor, Jesus says we are to welcome the stranger. That's what he tells us. As you have done to the least of these, you have done to me. That's what we read in Matthew 25. So as we understand it, this law will make that illegal. Will make welcoming the stranger illegal. The law will make following Jesus illegal. Therefore, Governor, we won't comply with your law. So, of course, that's what all the TV stations filmed, that moment of, therefore, we won't comply with the law. So you had a real confrontation here between what some felt were the dictates of faith and others felt the requirements of law. So a confrontation was ensuing in Arizona. What it showed to me was that we have this tension between being a nation of immigrants, which many of you talked about in your reflections, and a nation of laws, which we also want to be. We need to be both. How do you balance being a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws? Now, if you believe that law is important, the rule of law, as I do, and Sam does too, you heard him say it last week, enforcement of the law is not a bad thing. It's a necessary thing. But what Arizona showed me was that enforcement without reform of the system can be very cruel. Or that enforcement without compassion violates many of our own moral principles. And enforcement that breaks up families in particular, for many of us as people of faith, is just unacceptable. So there are literally now 1,100 people, 1,100 people being deported every day from this country for being undocumented, every single day. So when the DREAM Act was about to come up, you remember just in the last couple of weeks, there was a big rally on the Hill, a church full of undocumented people and their allies from all over the country, Catholic bishops, lots of people were there. And I was speaking to that group, and I looked around, and I guess I'm pretty good at estimating crowds at this point in my life, and it was about 500 people there in that church. So I just said, now every day, look around, every day, twice our number of people are being deported every single day. That's a lot of people. So, obviously, as we can gather, families are being broken up. There's story after story in your readings, and you've probably been paying attention. Families are being broken up. So enforcement, yes, but when the law is broken, the system is broken, enforcement can be cruel. Without compassion, it can be immoral. And when it breaks up families, it's, for many of us, unacceptable. So, and particularly when enforcement would even violate Christian conscience and ministry, as many Catholic bishops are now saying, this is clearly a problem. So, the stories of the real people, as many of you pointed out, are very poignant, they're very compelling, they're very alarming. And yet, in Washington, we can't solve this, seemingly. So there was a meeting with the president, or his top people on immigration. We've had some with him and some with his staff a few months ago now. And you remember the speech he gave at American University just this spring. That came right out of that meeting with him that we had. And the president laid out, really, the elements of a bill that would work. He talked about the need to balance calls for either amnesty on one hand. If you just provide amnesty to people who break the law without any consequence, you are, many feel, I think, reasonably undermining rule of law. On the other hand, deportation of 12 million people would be impossible to accomplish and likely very cruel even to try. So how do you balance these opposing views? He talked about bringing people out of the shadows, legalizing worker status, holding employers to responsibility, treating their workers well, no longer penalizing the children of undocumented parents, and creating what he called a tough and earned path to citizenship. And I think Sam probably talked last week about that. This is not a matter of automatic citizenship, but a process that could take 10, 15 years for most people. Back of the line, criminal checks, learning English, paying a fine, so on, so on, so on. But he said we simply have to find a common sense, he said, common sense and practical and compassionate solution. But a week after our rally on the Hill, a more palatable version of reform was up for vote. The DREAM Act, which, as you might know, is designed with students in mind, students with excellent sort of school records who want to go to college, and after being a student for a number of years or serving in the military, after that, they could begin a long path to citizenship. So you'd think, well, at least that would make sense. These are the best and brightest students. They clearly are contributors. They want to go to college. They want to serve in the military. And certainly, as a response to that, they could perhaps be put on this path to citizenship. But the vote failed. The vote failed. The reason these votes fail has more to do with election year politics and the way that election seasons are often good times to scapegoat people for whatever you're angry about. And so there's no courage really on either side to fight this through during an election year. And now with a new Congress coming in, that will likely be less sympathetic than the current Congress, the people who care about this agenda are really feeling quite discouraged at the moment, particularly young people. There's a real disillusionment occurring among young Hispanic kids, many of whom are undocumented. And you hear more stories of civil disobedience and chaining themselves to federal buildings. After I spoke in Arizona, the cameras were all on the speakers and the faith leaders until a group of young people chained themselves to the State House door. And the cameras, of course, loving conflict. They all ran over to the State House door, and here are these young kids who really are putting themselves at great risk. That's automatic deportation if you're undocumented and you're arrested. So feelings are running high, and on the other side in Arizona, and the country, polls show that a majority of Americans, white Americans, support this law in Arizona. So this is really polarizing the country very painfully. And yet, as Sam probably said last week, I don't know of any issue in a long, long time where there has been as much unity in the faith community around the issue. And I'm talking about people who vote Republican and Democrat, who are conservative evangelicals and Catholics and mainline Protestants and so on. I can't really think of very many religious leaders who have not supported the principle of comprehensive immigration reform. So it's an example of where, in a polarized country, there could be some leadership from the faith community that could help get us to a different and better place. The number of deportations under Obama has been higher than the number of deportations under George Bush. The administration has actually been quite disingenuous about that fact, often denying it. And I was in a meeting at the White House a while back, a couple months back, and where pastors were saying, and these are many times white evangelical pastors who have parishioners who are undocumented, and they have, as pastors tend to do, fallen in love with their people and care about what's happening to the Ramirez family, whose father just got deported and whose 7-year-old daughter now is crying every night. And they told the story to Valerie Jarrett, White House advisor, and Valerie Jarrett said, well, we are incentivizing criminal deportations, but not families. And the pastor said, Ms. Jarrett, we're talking about what's happening in our neighborhoods, to our parishioners. We know the families and they're being deported. And she said, no, it's not happening. And it was quite a scene. And finally, I knowing the pastors and Valerie Jarrett, I just said, Valerie, listen to the pastors. They're on the ground. This is happening. You can't keep saying it's not. You may not know it's happening, but it's happening on the ground. Because of that, because the administration, Obama promised in his first year to put immigration reform on the agenda, and he hasn't done it. And because of moments like that in the White House, the Hispanic community is very angry at this administration. And if you read the pundits about the election, there's real fear about the Hispanic turnout for Obama that occurred in 2008 not happening in 2010 because of this issue. This feels to people like a broken promise. The administration blames Republicans because not one Republican has shown support for this issue, even though about 11 of them have in the past. There was an immigration bill under George Bush that 11 Republicans, including John McCain, supported. It was actually a stronger bill than is being put forward now. But in the new, poisoned, politicized Washington environment, if the president of the other party is for something you were once for, but now he's for it, you are now against it, just because he's for it. There's no difference in the bills, except the last one was stronger and better than this current rendition. So with no Republican support and Democrats being worried about that percentage of folks who like Arizona and they're running for office in close elections, it's not a time that undocumented people are feeling very hopeful. So it's in that rally at the on the Hill, I was facing a whole room full of very dispirited people, particularly young people who really have hopes and aspirations that you know well, because they're the same as yours. And it looked like the DREAM Act was going to fail, and it did a couple of days later. And so what I said to them was that we were there that day because for us, there is no, for people of faith, there is no such thing as an illegal human being. That category doesn't exist for us. There are no such things as illegal human beings. Now, governments can, I think, reasonably have policies about citizenship and immigration that are good and good for the country and that respect the rule of law. But when a system is so broken as this one is, and has put so many people in this vulnerable position, there has to be a fixing of that system. We reiterated that day that in the first two chapters of the Bible, we learn that it's God's, that we are all made in God's image and that we are created as such. And the first two paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence, we hear that equality does not come from government, but from God. It says in the Declaration that we find its source is not in any law or constitution, but does not come from the color of your skin or the place you're from, but this is a truth we said that was self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with these inalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So we believe in the rule of law, but when the law has failed that purpose, then the law has to be fixed or changed. So that's really all that's being said by a very bipartisan constituency in the country, but in Washington it's all politically polarized. So it's always the case that I find that the politicians and the media and the pundits say things like, not yet, just be patient, wait for the political climate to change, this election to pass. They always say it's the other party's fault. Both sides are saying that. If everyone just votes for me and my party, all these problems will be solved. But let's recall the abolitionists heard this, suffragettes heard this, labor leaders heard this, civil rights leaders heard this, all told this time and time again. So it seems to be the job of politicians to have these considerations and make these pronouncements. But I would suggest that it's the job of the faith community to keep fighting anyway. Literally to ignore the excuses, because we know it doesn't have to be this way. And we ignore them not because we are here to follow political winds, but because we are here to change them finally. We ignore them, and we're not going away just because it's hard. And I said to this group sitting there on that day on the Capitol here, you could see their faces. They knew we were going to lose this time. And they knew that likely in 2011, the new Congress, there'd be no chance of winning comprehensive immigration reform. So I said, this is the moment when we as people of faith remember that change comes down there only if we keep our hope alive right here. And it's the hoping in hard times or against the political winds that makes change possible down there. And we're going to talk more about that in this class, that every change down there starts with a small group back here believing that change is possible and then betting their lives on it.
Reverend Rodriguez talked about kind of an elephant in the room with the immigration debate and whether Americans are really afraid of reform because of the changing status of America. They're afraid that America is no longer going to be seen as a country of white Christians, and the population is going to become more diverse, and that's what's really behind their fear of immigration reform and letting these people in. How do you think that plays into the immigration debate? Do you think that that's a big part of it?
Well, that was one of the issues I was going to raise in the second part. Let's throw it out now. I know what Sam means by that, the elephant in the room. By 2050, in this country, most Americans will trace their lineage to Africa, Asia, or Latin America. Most Americans by 2050 will be majority Africa, Asia, or Latin America. It's already that way in many places like Los Angeles, but it'll be that way in the country. And Sam is saying, and I would agree with him, that that is the elephant in the room here. There are other legitimate issues which we talked about, but would this be occurring if there was a problem on the northern border with Canada? Would it be the same set of issues? Now, we have a history in this country that, I don't know if you saw Stephen Colbert's testimony before the House Committee on Migrant Workers and Their Rights. You know, he did his usual shtick, and one of his best lines was, my grandfather did not traverse 4,000 miles of ocean to see this country turned over to a bunch of immigrants. So he was. So we have had, and he's pointing out, waves of anti-immigrant feeling, certainly toward other white people, toward Catholics and the Irish, and so on. So, but is there an elephant in the room here? Is there an elephant in the room? What do you think?
In the last couple of years, there's been a lot of gang violence spilling up through Mexico,
right.
Increased violence in Mexico. Do you think that at all shapes these racist stereotypes in the South? Is Arizona responding to the fact that, a lot of drug cartels down there, and is it part of the fear, a collective fear? Do you think that factors in?
I think it does. The interesting thing is that fear doesn't always follow data. The crime rates in Arizona are going down, actually. And so in the middle of this new, what some feel very harsh law, the crime rates have not been going up, they've been going down. But fear is palpable, and part of it is there is a horrible Mexican drug cartel problem. And there's even some differences in the ways the gangs, the Mexican drug gangs behave on either side of the border. They're much more nervous about committing atrocity on the American side than on the Mexican side. But still, there's violence and there's fear. So that's a drug problem. One of you in your papers said, raised the issue of, well, it's a very fundamental issue. Why are people coming to the north? I mean, it's because they just really want to be closer to Disneyland. They really want to get, 130 cable channels. Why would you want to leave your home? And in many cases, members of your family, parents leaving kids behind and sending money. There's more money goes into Mexico from wages of immigrants than all the aid from all the places, government, private. Much more money comes back to families from their family members in the U.S. On top of the low wages that are being paid, still enough is being saved and sent home that it makes people survive. Now, why would you want to do that rather than earn a livelihood in your own country, stay with your kids, stay in the place where you were born? So at some point, you have to get into larger issues that we were into last week. Some of you said in your papers, the connection between poverty and immigration here is clear. Why is Mexico not in a position to have a sustainable economy for most of its people? Now, that's a multifaceted question, and the Mexican government has responsibility, and so do the rest of us. But if that wasn't the case, you wouldn't see people. And I've been in the border. I don't know if you've ever seen down there. It is scary. It is scary to see people literally rushing across the border, running across. The coyotes, terrible business of offering passage across the border, exploiting the people financially. Women are raped on a regular basis by the coyotes. And so why would you do this? Separation, danger, unless you were feeling quite desperate. It's not like there are better genes in LA, So it raises structural issues, structural north-south economic issues, as well as law enforcement issues.